You want me to put that on my Tudor?
You are watching The Demise. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I know many of you really don't like Harry's wife, and you have your reasons, many of them good ones. Well, you'll be pleased to know that you are witnessing her demise. I don't mean that she's dying, but what I do mean is that you're watching the demise of her prominence. You're watching the demise of her fame. You're watching the demise of her relevance, if you accept there was a degree of relevance to begin with. Why is this? Well, in order to explain why you are watching her demise, we need to go back in time and ask, where did Harry's wife come from? I don't mean geographically, but I mean in terms of her status and career. She's an actress. She had various bit parts, and, as she never tires of telling us, she was in Suits. She was earning a decent salary as a consequence of appearing in that. She also had her blog, The Tig, and she had carved out a degree of recognition on the sort of Toronto social scene. But for the bulk of the world, they had no idea who Harry's wife, or pre-Harry's wife as she was then, was actually who she was. Nobody really knew about her. There'd be some people that, of course, recognised her from Suits, and probably had other characters that were their favourites, other actors that they thought that were better. There might have been people who had seen some of her promotional efforts and thought, oh, isn't that her from Suits? But for the most part, she did not invade the consciousness of much of the world. She then became famous, or you might argue infamous, comparatively wealthy, and hugely prominent. Why? Did she appear in a series of Hollywood blockbusters providing Oscar-worthy performances? No. Did she build up a solid theatre and TV portfolio, with hard work carving out a reputation as a solid performer? No. Perhaps she modelled for an internationally renowned fashion house, thus her face and body being plastered all over billboards around the world and seen in various video campaigns. No. Perhaps then she wrote a best-selling album that caused people to buy it in its millions. No. What about a best-selling book that entertained people, fascinated people, thrilled people? No. She did none of those things. She achieved her fame, the wealth, and the prominence because she married a prince from the United Kingdom. That is how the world knows about Harry's wife, and that's why I call her Harry's wife. Because were it not for him, she would still be that fairly unknown actress from Suits, ploughing her trade with the Tig and looking to advance herself on the social scene in Toronto. She hit the jackpot and landed a prince, which then meant that she joined the British royal family. And given the fact that she was a divorcee, American, a person of colour, this attracted even more interest. That's how the world knows about her, through marriage. Anybody can get married. It doesn't take any talent whatsoever. Sustaining a marriage, well, that's a different kettle of fish. But getting married, pretty easy, really. And thus, everything else followed because of who she married. Now, at that point, she has effectively two options. She can be assimilated into the royal family, adopt service, have her children, get to know the other royals, spend her time involved in charitable work, causing people to like her as she perhaps brings a degree of modernity to the royal family, that she's seen as a supportive wife to Harry, making him happy, that she's seen to do well in respect of what she does by way of charity work, foundations, etc. She has a life of luxury. She has a life of privilege. She gets a title. It's not for everybody, but for many people they would say, hey, come on, that's a pretty decent life. You're well known. You have people opening doors for you and curtsying to you, people making your meals, people interested in what you have to say, people expectant to meet you, pleased to meet you. What's not to like in all of that? And of course, remember, because she's a narcissist and her narcissism pursues the prime aims, that narcissism could very easily have harnessed her inclusion in the royal family and enabled her to assert control through her status as a member of the royal family, to draw fuel from all of the people that she would meet and look upon her, gain character traits from all those different people, and gain the residual benefits of a facade of caring and compassion, of service, access to money, access to networks. So her narcissism would have been very well served by it. So that was option one. The alternative would be to no longer be part of the royal family, and therefore, in order to maintain prominence, obtain wealth, she would need to perhaps appear in a Hollywood blockbuster, or go back to acting, a solid theatre or TV portfolio, or perhaps undertake some fashion work, some modelling for an internationally renowned fashion house or two. Perhaps write a best-selling album or a best-selling book. And all of that would mean that she would then carve out a career, an existence, aside from having been in the royal family, and in effect stand on her own 2 feet. As it was, as you know, as a consequence of the various threats to control that were posed by people telling her, no, you can't do that, and because she thought she was going to be the queen, and she thought that she would be the centre of the universe, the royal family became too difficult to control. And, with that, the media and the British public started to question her behaviours. And all of this came together to create a situation whereby her narcissism recognised that it could not be controlled directly, and she would need to retreat. And thus she did, over the water to Canada, and then eventually California. And then, this is where we find her. But the problem that she has is she has nothing save the link to her husband. Can she fall back on a series of well-written books and continue to write them? No. Could she go back to a career as a pop star? No. Could she perhaps bring out a range of excellent cookery books and a cookery program? No. Could she continue by acting and getting with all of the Hollywood A-listers? No. The demise of Harry's wife is occurring because outside of her membership of the royal family, she has absolutely nothing to offer. And it's important to remember this, she's unpopular. Accordingly, she doesn't have a pre-existing career of any weight to fall back on. Yes, she was an actress, but she wasn't that well known. And therefore, it's not as if she could go to producers and suggest that I'm going back into the acting game. Give me a $20 million fee for an appearance in a film. They'd laugh until their bladders burst. She doesn't have that gravitas or status. It might be that someone perhaps could, if they were completely nuts, throw her a bone and say, okay, we've got this new series about a woman who's made of industrial beige. We think you'd be ideal to play her. You'll get $30,000 an episode. That's not good enough for her. She's become accustomed to a particular lifestyle with an expense that's associated with that, where $30,000 an episode simply won't cut it. And what her narcissism has effectively done is back her into a corner and brought about her demise in terms of fame, wealth, and prominence. Other people achieve those things as a consequence, really, of two things. They have an innate talent which happens to be spotted, and an existing organisation, such as an agency or a sports club or a publishing house, says, what you've got there is really good. We want to take your talent and apply our presence in the market, our marketing muscle, our financial firepower, our contacts, and make you big. And thus, the meeting of talent with an existing machine causes that person to achieve international, worldwide fame. They've got the ability, and those that have the capacity to catapult that person into the fame stratosphere recognize that they've got that ability, and it's a win-win. We'll make you famous and wealthy. We will also make money off the back of you. We bring all of our assets, all of our power to bear on pushing you forward. Brilliant. In other instances, people make it as a consequence of a dint of years of hard work. Slogging away, going around the clubs, building up a following, working hard on social media to cultivate interaction with people so that eventually they have that hockey stick moment and it takes off because they've spent years building a brand, years putting the effort in to cultivate relationships with fans and followers so that those fans and followers say, hey, there's this guy on YouTube, or there's this person on Spotify, or have you read this book on Amazon? So that other people go, actually, that's rather good, isn't it? And it builds momentum. But notice again that in that instance, they've got to have some form of talent, or they're hard workers. Take the Kardashians. What are they famous for? Being famous. But what you can't say is that they're lazy. They've worked hard at cultivating a brand. They allowed their lives to be put out there as a show, and then as they built up that following and caused more and more people to be interested in them, they engaged in creating other lines so that they have become notable and wealthy. Thus, those people have either been boosted by the application of an existing framework, or they've grafted and they've grafted and they've grafted. Harry's wife has attempted to bolt on the framework. She's essentially lazy. She's into the grift, not the graft. And therefore, working hard at creating something and gaining fans isn't something that she's particularly interested in. She wants it yesterday. She's also hampered by the fact that whilst, of course, she does have some supporters, there are many people that don't like her. Based upon her own behaviour, she's made herself unpopular. In effect, she stymied her chances by causing a lot of people to say, don't like her, would never buy anything in relation to her, would never purchase anything that she produces. Accordingly, she's had to go down the framework route. But for that framework, i.e. the WME agency, they need to have some talent to work with. And that's where she falls short. She hasn't got any. She has nothing meaningful to say, although she believes that she does. She has no fantastic rhetoric. She's not a political animal. She's not a screenwriter or book writer. She's not a singer or a dancer. There is no talent there. And therefore the problem is that not only is she talent-free zone, so WME have nothing to really offer in relation to her, again, she's also unpopular. As I explained to you yesterday, she's the tag-along now. WME have resorted to saying to their existing clients, if you've got something going down and we represent you, would you please involve Harry's wife? It's like the older brother being told to take his kid brother along wherever he goes, because he can't make friends for himself. Harry's wife, the only thing that people were interested in relation to her was her tales about the royal family. And she's used that up by, one, talking about it incessantly, and two, becoming very boring because it's just been the same wah, wah, wah victim mentality, and people have got sick of it. That was a sole card, and it's been overplayed, so she can't use it any longer. She looks at her hand, and she's got nothing else left. No talent, no ability, no spark, no charisma. And therefore, the agency has nothing to work with, and she's not willing to put the graft in to cultivate and build a proper fan base, which may actually be impossible given the level of unpopularity that she has. Thus, faced with this, her demise is imminent. She's not going to be able, through dint of hard work, to create a fantastic brand. It's not like people will give her that second chance. It will be poo-pooed, ridiculed. It will fail. That's even if she tries. And she's unlikely to. See how long it took her to pump out a few episodes of Archetypes. See how long it took them to create something for Netflix. See how we keep being told that the TIG's returning, but it hasn't. That with Instagram she was coming back. She mentioned that last year. But other than there be a handle sat there with a load of expectant sugars, nothing has happened with it. She really isn't into the work because her narcissism tells her this should be given to you on the plate because you are the amazing Harry's wife. You don't have to work for this. People should be falling over themselves to offer you gigs and deals and money. And she seriously believes that. The agency has nothing to work with because she's talent-free, and people are aware of the toxicity associated with her, so they're extremely wary of risking their own hard-earned reputation and brand by associating with her. And thus, this gives her nowhere to go, unwilling to put in the hard work, and seen as too difficult to be associated with. She's just going to be a tag-along until the money starts to run out. And as I've explained before, Harry will be blamed for all of this. Harry will be blamed for the failure, and he will be disengaged from. And what she will have to try and do is find some sap that is wealthy, has access to networks, that will have a relationship with her. Because she's not going to be able to maintain the fame and the wealth through talent or hard work. She's just going to have to rely upon ensnaring another victim. And it's not necessarily guaranteed that she's going to be able to do that. But in terms of her fame, her wealth and her prominence, you are witnessing the demise because she's got nowhere else to go now, because she won't work at it, and she has no talent that an agency can utilize to apply their muscle to give her the things that she requires. This means that obscurity beckons. This means that the money will start to run out unless, as I mentioned, she can find somebody else. Someone else that she could ensnare and draw in, a billionaire, for example. And given her advancing age and the horrors of aging, see parts passim, there are plenty of other tastier morsels available to those billionaires than Harry's wife. This leaves her with a difficult situation. Her narcissism will be telling her that she's entitled to this money, that she ought to be famous, that all of these people ought to be doing things for her, but it's slipping through her fingers. It's evading her. And it's likely that she will have to retreat as a consequence of this. That the money will run out for the PR puff pieces, so she's less prominent. That there are no invitations to events because nobody wants her. She might get the odd sympathy invitation that would occur. But for the most part, that prominence would shrink away. She will always be fueled. She'll be able to find people around her to provide her with fuel, so she's not going to enter into a fuel crisis. But there will be a loss of status, which will wound her. There will be a loss of wealth, which will wound her. She will start to head towards obscurity. And you are now watching the demise of her fame, wealth, and prominence as she heads towards that obscurity. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.